So before I introduce our speakers tonight, I wanted to just say thank you to our generous sponsors who help make these seminars possible. We have Upton and Hatfield, a law firm with offices in Concord, Hillsborough, and Portsmouth, and they provide legal services to the people, businesses, and municipalities in New Hampshire. And we also have Finch & Maloney, a Manchester-based law firm that provides IP counseling and services to technology companies. And so we're very appreciative of their support. So just a couple of housekeeping items. So we're going to have our presentation first, followed by some Q&A at the end. And then afterwards, we're going to have a chance to continue that conversation with some networking. So I hope you all stay and enjoy the food and the beer. And it's going to be really good food this time from Settlement in Dover. So look forward to that. All right, so tonight, our topic is one that we're really excited to learn more about because, to be honest, I don't have a great knowledge base about it. It's a crowdsourcing and digital maker communities. And our first speaker is Matt O'Hearn, Assistant Professor of Marketing at DePaul College. Professor O'Hearn researches its focus on the active role that consumers play in developing innovative new products and offerings and providing support and advice to their fellow customers. And then after he's done, we'll have Gavin Bauman, who is a Technical Evangelist at Microsoft. And Gavin will be telling us a little bit more about his experience with customer feedback-driven innovation and the makerspaces at Microsoft. So without further ado, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Chelsea. So thanks, everybody, for coming. As Chelsea said, my name is Matt O'Hearn. I work in the DePaul College of Business. And for many years, I've been interested in maker communities, in open source software communities, in peer-to-peer helping communities. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about a conceptual project we're working on about product remixing and this idea of the innovation as data era. So talk a little bit about that. Also dovetails with our research we're doing on 3D printing communities. So probably, is everybody familiar with this product? So this is like this is the Ford Model T. This is, I think, a really quintessential product. It kind of shows the logic behind the early 20th century, the mass production era. And so Henry Ford developed really great processes. So this era is really about efficiency. It's about standardized processes, about mass economies of scale. Not always about customer choice. So I think Henry Ford once said, you can have the Model T in any color as long as it's black. Does anybody know why he chose black? So it was the fastest drying paint, right? Black was the fastest drying paint, so it was able to get that, make the machines that much faster. So this is, I think, if you imagine, before we had the era of big production, we were talking about an artisan culture. And when we go to mass production, we really are being able to put goods in the hands of people and make them available to a wide number of people that never had access to them before. So really kind of a big step in terms of our advancement. So if you fast forward about 100 years and we hit the 21st century, then all of a sudden we come up with new processes and new options for getting customers goods in the customer's hands. So one good example of that, in my mind, is mass customization. And you might be familiar with the Nike ID website. So if you wanted to go to Nike ID, you can customize your sneakers. You can choose a wide variety. I think there are over 1 billion different combinations of different patterns. You can write words in your sneakers. Nike won't let you write the word sweatshop on your sneakers, unfortunately. So people have tried that. That's offensive speech in the Nike world. But you can do a lot of great things with your sneakers to really customize it. So there's been a lot of research, especially in marketing. There's been a lot of research about why people are attracted to this kind of thing. So there's some work that's been done about uniqueness, kind of like creating a product that nobody else has, and that feeling of uniqueness. There's also this other thing that's closely related, this idea of I made it myself. So the I made it myself effect, this idea of really being more closely linked to the product because you had a hand in making it. And then also different work has been done on things looking at the process fit, process enjoyment, the load, the requirements of the process, things like that. So this obviously is a different perspective, really taking some of the ideas of mass production and really making a market of one, for lack of a better word, through mass customization. So it's a very different approach. And I think another thing that really kind of has come into play in like the last 30 years is this idea of lead users. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the examples of lead users, lead user innovation, and there's been some exciting products that have really arisen from users, not really because of a lab that a company is running, but from actual users kind of tinkering, altering their products, and coming up with better products. So really good example of that in my mind is the mountain bikes. So the early mountain bikes, people like Gary Fisher were kind of tinkering, basically taking 10 speeds, putting them onto different frames, putting bigger tires on those, taking them out, testing them, refining them. And this is also an alternative to trying to give people goods that really aren't available. So we know from the lead user literature that this can be really effective. So oftentimes lead user produced goods are more creative and more innovative than firm produced goods. We also know that lead users can play a really crucial role in terms of validating, testing a product, providing feedback, and optimizing a product before it's launched. So they can play a really big role in bringing a product to market. So those are kind of two alternatives to the mass production ethos, and we're actually looking at a different thing that we call product remixing. So if I just kind of summarize, in mass customization, the first alternative, it's really characterized in my mind. So it's really accessible. So if you go to Nike ID, anybody can do it, right? So anybody can click on the tongue of a shoe, choose a color, and make that color, the tongue that color, make the sole a certain color, add a pattern. Very, very accessible. So you don't have to be technically skilled to do that. But on the other side, the platform itself is relatively constrained. So, we can only alter a few different things, right? I can't decide to make the tongue like 1/3 this color, 1/3 this color, 1/3 this color. So there's some constraints kind of built into that. And I think also you'd have to say that a lot of the mass customization platforms, they're cool. They allow for unique personalization of products, but a lot of times they're not really a catalyst. They're not really a driver of true innovation, kind of moving to another product, kind of a very different kind of product than the base product. So it's really hard to imagine how the next rocket ship could come from Nike ID, because we can have a more beautiful shoe, a little bit different shoe, a more unique shoe, but really that next level innovation, it's hard to understand how that can come from most mass customization platforms. And then if we contrast that to lead user innovation, we have to say, well, it has relatively low consumer accessibility, in the sense that to be a lead, there's a reason why they call them lead users, right? Because they have a high degree of skill, a high degree of technical skill usually, a high degree of artistry oftentimes. So actually just being able to do that, being able to be technically gifted enough to do these things is actually quite difficult, and only a small number of people can do that. These platforms, if you think about the platform, a lot of times the platform is highly constrained, because physical products that are distributed by companies, they're not always meant to be hacked, right? And oftentimes kind of hack resistant. So the people that were developing the first mountain bikes, the platform didn't facilitate that. They had to basically bend the platform to their will and make these new innovations. Okay. But on the other hand, the innovation potential is very, very high. And we know that users out there kind of working on their own, satisfying their own needs, trying to satisfy their needs that companies really didn't anticipate, that can be a really great catalyst for innovation. So I think these are how these two approaches differ from one another. And what I want to talk about today is kind of a third way, a different approach that we call product remixing. And the definition of product remixing that we use is that product remixing is the process of taking existing product elements, altering them or recombining them in a manner that substantially alters the core product. Okay. So that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of physical product remixing. And if we think about the roots of this, it doesn't really come from technology per se, but a lot of the tenets and the basic roots of these things come from other things like media studies. Or if you think about the music industry, there's a big part of the music industry that's really dedicated to mashups, right, and remixing and sampling and things like that. So it really comes from the graphic arts. It comes from arts in general, from the music industry, and also if you're a fan of Lawrence Lessig, in Lawrence Lessig's book Remix, he really talks about our current culture and the cultures that have come before before, and he talks about this the idea or this concept of sometimes there's right cultures, so R-I-G-H-T, excuse me, W-R-I-T-E. And so right versus rewrite cultures. And he says that many, for generations, this idea of rewrite culture has been really prominent and really, really prevalent in the way that we approach different works. And it's just kind of almost a given that we're able to take different songs, kind of add our own take on those, to change those, or to add our own elements. And nowadays, with intellectual property law as it is, that's kind of faded away to a certain extent. So this is like where we took, I think, conceptually, where we thought about the core of this idea of remixing. So let me give you an example. So in music remixing, as technology has advanced, we've got tons and tons of different opportunities for remixing culture to occur in the music industry. So we're all familiar with iTunes, right? So I can get music, I can download music on iTunes or CC Mixter or any number of different sites. If I have a program like GarageBand, I can remix and I can add different elements. I can alter a certain sound file. If I have speakers, I can play it. And if I devote enough time to it, I can actually make a career out of it. So I'm not sure if I'm familiar with this fellow. His name is Dan Gillis. He's a DJ. His stage name is Girl Talk, and he has, I think, the 5th or 6th different album that he's put out that basically only uses remixed music, and he's built an entire career out of remixed music. So his label is called Illegal Art, right? So oddly enough, and that's a really good example from the music industry of how remixing is occurring. So if we take a look, how does that work now in the product realm? So we understand how it works with GarageBand. How does it work in the terms of products? And I think we would argue that something very similar now is going on with products. So if I have the iTunes of digital 3D digital scans, which is Thingiverse.com, which has right now, I believe, over 400,000 different digital designs that you can download and access, then I have that raw material, right? If I have a CAD file, if I have a low-cost or no-cost CAD technology, then I'm either able to create CAD files or to download those files and alter them on my computer. If I have a 3D printer like the MakerBot or the Ultimaker or any number of low-cost 3D printers with these costs going down over time, I'm able to produce these at home. And what that means is that I can make all kinds of things. I can download different digital files from Thingiverse and make things on my own machine at home. So this is a cell phone holder, a stand for my cell phone that I can digitally download and print on my own computer. So kind of similar thing going on here. And the cool thing is, in terms of remixing, we take that basic design. So somebody makes this basic design, they do a CAD rendering, they post it to Thingiverse. Other people can take that design and they can alter it as they wish. So maybe you don't want this kind of cell phone holder. Maybe you'd like something that's a little bit more personalized, a little bit more evocative of yourself, and you'd like to customize. Easy to do, right? So easy to do. So we can take the original design, and some people might want to have like a Jesus, right? Like have a Jesus cell phone stand. So I always thought Jesus might have other things to do, better things to do than hold my cell phone up. But everyone to each their own. So that's a possibility, right? You could do the Jesus remix. Or if you're more a laid-back person, right, you could have the Stargazer, like the Stargazer remix. So these are people have taken the original file and they've altered the file to customize it to serve their own needs, right, to put their own little personal spin on it and to serve their own needs. So I think that's like kind of a trivial example, but it gets the point across, the idea that we can take different digital designs, we can alter them, and then we can also distribute them, print them ourselves, optimize them. So this is, I think, kind of a combination between utilitarian and aesthetic, but they can go from in both directions. Okay, so what's new here? So I would argue that what's new here is that, as Rado and Reese say, we're seeing the materialization of digital information. But we're also seeing it in the other direction. We're also seeing the digitalization of material information, which I think is also equally as interesting, perhaps even more so. So we think that in terms of big data, especially a lot of our thoughts these days in marketing run along the lines of how do we use big data? How do companies access big data? How do we actually utilize big data to make better decisions? And we believe that, first of all, we believe that the dividing line between the digital and the physical worlds is rapidly disappearing. So whereas once we had a very distinct difference between something that was a physical product and a digital product, with the advent of technology, we think that's changing very rapidly. And we also think that this new era is really kind of upon us. This era where the thinking or the paradigm is going to be not innovation from data, but innovation as data. But before I go to that idea, I would like to describe a little bit of the current paradigm, the predominant paradigm, which we call innovation from data. So in this paradigm, think about the big data perspective. What are firms doing? How do firms utilize, how do firms harness big data? Well, first of all, firms monitor what customers are doing. For example, what the customers are doing online. So we go out, we find data about what customers are doing, right? We use the kind of data that we're looking for is what we might call something like digital exhaust. So these are behavioral traces, what people have done in the past. So for example, I might want to look at somebody's social media activities and kind of get an idea for what they've been doing. I might actually be able to track people's location or people's purchase history. And based on this knowledge, based on these data, then I might be able to do a number of things, right? So if I'm thinking about a CRM program, I might be able to give them customized offerings that are going to appeal to them more. I might be able to anticipate, so if I'm Amazon, I might be able to anticipate based on past purchases what somebody is going to buy in the future and actually send it to them before they order it. So I know that Amazon's working on that right now. So this is the idea that we take what people have done in the past, we take this digital exhaust data, and we try to use that to make better decisions. So here, the firm really is the straw that stirs the drink. So the firm is really playing the guiding role, the leading role in gathering this data, analyzing the data, and most importantly, deciding which products get produced. So this is how we use this. We use this data to make better decisions and to come up with more innovative products. So let's contrast that with this idea of innovation as data. So innovation as data, I don't know if probably this crowd is familiar with Richard Stallman and this quote from Richard Stallman, that information wants to be free. So I think that's an idea that is really closely aligned with this innovation as data paradigm. So in this paradigm, firms openly share data with consumers, and the consumers openly share data with each other. So that's a big difference than the innovation from data perspective. In this paradigm, not the digital exhaust, but actual source data about the certain product is really the most important kind of data in this paradigm. So the physical nature of the product, for example, as expressed by the CAD file, which can be used to reprint that product. And then finally, consumers are really playing the leading role here in gathering source data, remixing it, and deciding for themselves, not the firm, which products should be produced. So very, very different kind of paradigm, kind of different kind of idea, and a different kind of process for creating innovative products. Okay? So there are tools, in our mind, there are tools that are greatly enhancing and facilitating this transition to innovation as data. So one tool that is really doing this is the idea of digital scanners. So there's digital scanners that range from very expensive ones that you cannot move around to very inexpensive portable scanners that fit on your iPad that you could use to, for example, scan your colleagues' heads, to do a physical scan of a small statue or a piece, like a paperweight on your desk. So as this occurs, right, so as low-cost digital scanners penetrate the market, people with no CAD experience, with no programming experience, are able to more effectively create their own digital copies of products. And as that happens, then they're able to get them on Thingiverse easier, to distribute those things, and get that supply of digital products out there. So another thing that we think is really empowering customers is the advent of these marketplaces or these repositories like Thingiverse, where people can get access to a wide array of different files. So this is we've been scraping Thingiverse data for quite a while now, and for the October 2014 to the July 2015 period, we saw that there were over 38,000 individual designers that posted a design on Thingiverse, so it's quite large. There were over 124,000 unique designs that occurred during that period. Almost 12 million downloads of those designs, and about 19,000 examples where those products were remixed and altered and modified by these designers. So pretty substantial activity, and also just like the idea of portable 3D scanning, a way for people to access and to print their own products without actually being able to code or really to modify the product themselves. So pretty cool stuff going on there. So another example I think that really kind of brings us into play is if we look at, this is a product, it's called the Cyborg Beast, and it's actually a remix of an earlier product called the Robo Hand. So Robo Hand was developed by a South African carpenter who accidentally sawed his fingers off one day in the workshop, and a costume and prop designer from Seattle who worked virtually to design a solution to give him a working hand that would work for him. So this has gone through several different iterations. So we've got this example of a product like this that has been refined over time. And if we go to the Thingiverse website, there are many, many different remixes of this product where people are tweaking certain things. So sometimes they tweak one part of it. Sometimes they come up with a completely different design, repost it. It serves as raw material for other people's inspiration, other innovations, and such. So I think it's a really good example of how this remixing process works and how it kind of almost organically expands depending on people's interests. So I think a really good example of kind of how product remixing is unfolding in the current time. All right? So the real question here, one question is, if you give people access to the source code for a product, so if I use a digital scanner to scan a different product, to put it up online, I give people access to the file, give them the processes and the tools they need to remix it, what are people going to make? And I think the easy answer is a lot of things you don't expect and whatever they want. Right? So here's one example. So this is a mashup of I don't know if anybody had Lincoln Logs when they were a kid. Some people had Legos. I had both of those things, right? But my Legos wouldn't fit with my Lincoln Logs, right? Voila, 2016. Now I can fit both of those sets together. And in fact, there's a project that there's like 10 different kinds of, there's like Plan Toy from Europe, there's Lincoln Logs, there's Tinker Toys. So there's tons and tons of different attachment pieces like this that this project produces. And again, do you think Lego would make this? Do you think Tinker Toy or Lincoln Log would make this? Probably they wouldn't, right? Because they wouldn't want to team up with a competitor. But users want this, and users can create stuff like this. So they can take it in ways the company really doesn't anticipate. Another good example is, I don't know if you guys like sriracha as much as I do, but sometimes I feel like it would be nice if it came out a little bit faster. So I can take some extruder piece that's on Thingiverse. I can alter that so that it precisely fits my sriracha cap, and I can create a dual extruder for my sriracha sauce, right? So that's a good example of a product remix that, again, probably unanticipated, and the companies would never have thought of. Another great example is from the branding perspective. I could have two brand franchises. So some people were just talking about Darth Vader, and we talk about the Star Wars franchise. Other people like the Hello Kitty franchise. We can morph both right into one thing. So this is the Hello Kitty Darth Vader, which is in my office, probably displayed in my office. And again, these are people, probably LucasArts is not going to authorize this product, and they're probably not going to support it. Hello Kitty people also probably don't like Darth Vader, but users want this, right? And they create these kinds of mashups. So then these are all good examples of user empowerment and kind of taking things in a direction that we really didn't anticipate. So what are the takeaways? What are the implications of this idea of product remixing, the innovation as data perspective? And I think there's a few. So I think one is that under the IAD, the innovation as data perspective, consumers really become a leading source of new product innovation. So you put raw material out there, or they find a way to put the digital raw material out there, and they let the community, they let the crowd go at it. And they come up in directions, and they come up with products that you really wouldn't have anticipated if you were directing this as a firm. Another idea is that firms increasingly really can't fully control their products or the source data that underlie those products. So it used to be that companies were really insulated. So if you made a physical product, you were more insulated from things like piracy or counterfeiting or copying than you were if you were like a music company. So I think we know with file sharing, like what file sharing did to the music industry earlier in this century. Now, a lot of companies these days, are really going to be have to deal and grapple with these challenges, and they're going to be these threats are going to be poised by people who can copy products, who can reproduce the products, and sometimes make these products in forms that are superior to the original products that the companies gave them. Okay. We also think too, if we remember back to discussing about lead users and thinking about mass customization, the innovation as data perspective, this product remixing offers a highly accessible way for people to create their own products, because these things are up on Thingiverse, right? It's pretty easy. Highly open, they're freely available, and we have these platforms, and relatively high and innovative potential as well, which is kind of a nice trifecta to have. It also raises some questions about, like, when should a firm release a pilot? If we wanted to like actively use this and actively kind of harness this this trend, what would we want to do? Would we want to release a product which is relatively finished, one that's relatively unfinished, and ask users to help finish it for us? So that's kind of a question right now, kind of an open question about when the precise point of time that firms would want to have consumers kind of help out or be participating in this process. It also gives companies, we know from the lead user literature and the mass customization literature, we know that that people that would remix, they are very, very likely to develop really close relationships with the products that they create, be very proud of those. Their status in the community is oftentimes very closely tied to those products. So that's a potential way for companies to create a sense of authenticity, to connect more deeply with their customers. So there's a positive side. Also, as we said, there's a dark side or a downside in the sense of perhaps piracy, where customers are copying and perhaps even reselling, either freely distributing or reselling your products. Or in terms of brand management. So I'm guessing that LucasArts didn't think about the Darth Vader Hello Kitty product line extension, but consumers are doing that themselves. And it's very, very difficult to stop people at this point. Also, it's also hard, from an IP perspective, it's really hard to know who to sue. Like, who do you sue? Do you sue the creator of the file? Do you sue the person that posted online, the person that printed it out? So right now, that's a very, very difficult thing for companies that want to enforce their their IP property. Very, very difficult to do, right? It's also, I think, one takeaway is that this is not necessarily, so the innovation as data perspective, it's not really a replacement for the innovation from data perspective. It can actually work very well together. So if you imagine you put something out there, you let people create, and it's possible then to take those innovations and roll them back into official products, right? Or to create accessories. So maybe you don't create opportunities for people to remix the core product, but you add accessories that people can do to build on the core product. So there's opportunities for firms to work together within the IAD perspective to leverage this and use this in a positive way. And I think also, like, a lot of times when I talk to people in industry, they say, well, I'm not really interested in that. I'm not really ready for that. We don't have any plans to do that. Well, that might be irrelevant, right? If you have plans to do that, that might be irrelevant because consumers are doing it now, right? Consumers, if your product is popular enough, they're going to remix it. They're going to copy it. They're going to make stuff, and you can't really control it. So the kind of, I think in our minds, the logic that we've used to control and to distribute products to consumers is really rapidly changing. And I think more power is in the consumer's hands now. And now the question really is, do we want to ignore this? Do we want to try to fight it head on, which might not be the best strategy? Or do we want to co-opt and we want to use this in some way to get customers on our side? So I think there's three possibilities of working within this framework. And I think every company has to kind of decide which one works best from them. So thanks very much. So I think we went a little over our time. So my apologies, but thanks very much, everyone.
So I didn't have slides originally, guys. I said I was just going to come up here and I was going to talk about things that we have going on in the office in the way of building out customized solutions using Internet of Things. And we have a maker project at our job, at my job, called The Garage. But as Matt was speaking, it started to ring true. So a talk I'd actually delivered recently on custom controllers and why they're like the coolest thing out there. So I'd really like to talk about that. Is it okay? Can I project from my PC or?
Yeah, there's a HDMI.
And I was like, oh my gosh, no, I need. Oh great. Yeah. If you've got HDMI, I can do that, or VGA if we really need to. Oh sweet, you are Person of the Year. Thank you so much. So, let me go ahead. I think like half of my slides are cut between two PowerPoints, guys. So it's going to be ugly, but we're going to make it happen, I promise. Okay. Sweetness. And there are also stuff on this PowerPoint slide that there's also stuff that I'm not going to talk about, that I am going to talk about, excuse me, that's not on this PowerPoint. So it's going to be awesome. Just know that. That's all you need to know. It's going to be great. So who am I? My name is Gavin Bauman. I'm a technical evangelist at Microsoft, which is by far the world's most awkward job title ever. I promise, like I went home and I told my mom knew, but my grandmother, she's like, oh my God, Gavin, I'm so happy you got a job after college, because I'm a college hire for Microsoft. And she goes, what do you do? And I'm from the South, guys, I'm from Louisiana. So she's like, the buckle of the Bible Belt, sort of, really nice church going lady. And I go, I'm a technical evangelist. And she goes, oh, that is so, what? And so to explain to her, I was like, well, I teach about nerd stuff. So my job is to be equal parts software developer and public speaker. So whenever Microsoft launches any new developer tools, I'm the guy that goes and I go into the communities. I talk to students, startups. I talk to professional developers about the tech. I build documentation for it. I make product demos. I get to work on some of the coolest projects at Microsoft, honestly. And it honestly falls into this maker community. So to put in perspective a little bit of what we do, when I came in, one of the biggest things they baited me into accepting the position is that the team that I was going to be a part of was working on a Kinect powered t-shirt cannon. Are you guys familiar with the Microsoft Kinect? It's like this awesome series of cameras. There's an RGB camera, there's an infrared camera, there's a full 1080p HD camera. There's an array of 4 microphones on this thing, and people use it for, looking as goofy as they possibly can in their living rooms to just dance. But we slapped one on a t-shirt cannon, and using that array of 4 microphones, we were able to determine directional audio. So depending on how loud an audience is in any given room, the t-shirt cannon automatically turns to the loudest side of the room and just starts launching t-shirts. And I was like, yeah, I want to work on this, yeah. So the maker sort of vibe and the Internet of Things is huge in my group as well as at Microsoft. I also happen to be a video game enthusiast. People laugh at that, and a certified awesome person. People laugh at that, but it's a thing, I promise. There's a board of directors, and there's recommendation letters you need. It's a huge thing. So I talked about this. This was at PAX East, which is like this amazing video game conference over in Boston, about custom controllers in video games. And I'm going to assume, wrongfully probably, that at least half of you guys are gamers in here, right? Am I right in saying that? Yeah? Yeah? He's like, I played World of Warcraft like for at least 5 years. He's got it. But that's perfect, because this slide is for people who've never even jumped into that vein of things, right? So having never played a racing game, would you guys rather jump into a car with like this automatic or a manual transmission, right? Or would you prefer to like play it on this little 5-inch screen? Like which one? The one on the left, right? Yeah, that's more immersive, right? And that's back in the arcade days, right? And while they were awesome and things of that nature, they've sort of died off as a result of home consoles and things of that nature. So I like pandas. This panda has nothing to do with this slide. So I talk about changing the nature of interactivity in the context of gaming, but this honestly applies anywhere, right? So the Internet of Things movement and the maker movement have largely changed this, right? This is what arcades used to be. And with things like the controller, this is what arcades have turned into now, right? Instead of this awesome little cockpit you have, you got this garbage little dance pad that everyone assumes that this is what the world is now. It's kind of depressing. So we attempt to recreate the experience at home, but we're not great in doing this. And honestly, not very many people bought this horrible little dance pad on the left here, but millions of dollars went into research and development for it, went into project conception, and they ended up just sitting on the shelves, right? And that's not great. But we are having the return of the arcade, and it'll never be in its full glory like it was in the glory days in the 90s, right? But we are doing things right now that companies with a lot of capital are able to go ahead and implement, right? So if you guys have not gone to Toy Story Mania in Disney World, you need to do it like yesterday. If you want to like reclaim your childhood, like do it. Also, virtual reality is huge now, right? And we're seeing things in industry like virtual reality arcades, where people literally walk around with an entire PC strapped on their back, right, with a giant power supply. We're talking at least 30 pounds worth of stuff. They put this VR headset on, and they run around aimlessly in a room. And honestly, if you're looking at it objectively, it's garbage. Like, it's horrible. Like, these guys all look aimless. They have no idea what they're doing until you put the headset on, right? And you're just like, oh, this is happening. This is great. I don't ever want to go home. So that's the end of that slideshow. I just wanted to talk about really cool projects going on in the maker community right now, and things that we're doing to bring making in general back, right? And what Microsoft has done is we built the garage, and that's what I'm here to talk about. The garage is our internal makerspace, right? For employees, any employees. You can be a developer, you can be a salesman attempting to learn software development. Anyone who works at Microsoft is welcome to come into the garage. And we've worked on some awesome projects. It's also a means for us to get interns involved in Microsoft, and we give them a blue badge like everyone else has in Microsoft. These guys get, like, you know, they're treated like employees. They get a 401k and everything, and they just spend time all day playing in the garage. So we've got 3D printers, we've got things like Raspberry Pis, we've got you know, mobile app development kits, the entire 9 yards. And what they're able to do, I'm sorry, I have my notes here. What they've been able to do is work on some really awesome projects in the way of making a new means of interacting with your phone. We've created new keyboards for your phones. The interns now, I don't know if this is public or not, but if it's not, just in case, don't tell anyone. What the interns now are working on is hooking up a bunch of Raspberry Pis on a network across the city. And they're essentially acting as a bunch of network repeaters so that there can be citywide Wi-Fi for everyone, right? And that's what the interns get to do. Question?
So I assume the Raspberry Pi is not one you eat.
No, oh shoot, Gavin, know your audience. Okay, you're right. Raspberry Pis are not edible. Well, Raspberry Pis are edible, but this Raspberry Pi is not edible. So what the Raspberry Pi is, for anyone that may or may not know, it's a $35 to $40, actually there's a $5 variant now, tiny personal computer, right? And it was originally conceived as a means of teaching kids in lower performing areas who couldn't afford their own personal computer how to code, right? So with that was the intended goal. And with that, we've just, as a maker community, have taken it and run amok with it, right? We've done a bunch of things. You can slap a ton of sensors on a Raspberry Pi. Like, I've made an arcade machine out of it, like hooked it up to like these 6 controllers and like recreated Street Fighter 2 because I've got nothing better to do on a weekend. Also, like, people have done things in the way of making automated dog food dispensers by slapping a servo motor on top of it and coding it up to dispense dog food whenever it gets an email from this address, right? There's a ton of possibilities. And I do want to talk about that. There's a ton of good that's being done with things like the Raspberry Pi, and there's a ton of other ones. There's Arduinos, there's BeagleBones, etc. But adding a bunch of sensors and adding a bunch of motors onto things allows us to collect tons of data, like insane amounts of data. Oh, this is Arduino Uno? This is what one of these little boards look like, right? They're tiny, right? And you can do a ton of stuff with just this. I'm so glad you brought this to me. This is great. So, you know, it's got a power supply, right? This one's got a USB, it looks like a USB-A port and things like that. And you can slap with sensors, what are called shields, right on top of this. And actually at PAX, where I delivered that really short presentation, we had a demo of a Raspberry Pi with a photo sensor on it. And if you take your shirt and you put it on top of the photo sensor, it's not reading any values. And we had a game hooked up to it. So like once it registers as dark, we had like monsters come out in the game. And if you take your shirt off the photo sensor, like all the monsters go away. It's completely useless, guys. We just wanted to show off that we could do it, right? But again, security is a huge concern for makers right now, and for people looking to take makers from, you know, just these homegrown DIY projects into the industry. Security should be number one in what you're considering whenever you build. And right now, that isn't the case. So there are sort of conspiracy theorists in computer science, as you guys may already know, that believe that if we don't take a stand right now and make sure that security is our #1 concern whenever we're building Internet of Things or maker projects, we're going to have to succumb to legislation. We're going to have this huge set of court cases around it, and we're going to end up like the medical industry, right? Not knocking the medical industry, but how many papers do you need to sign to open a cabinet if you're a doctor, right? It's insane. And I don't ever want to have to do that. Part of the allure of tech is that you can get started quickly, right? And you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. So, with that being said, Internet of Things is awesome, but it's sort of with great power comes great responsibility, right? And an example of this is the one James Sturdivant, my coworker, gave me. He goes, well, Gavin, if you have a motion sensor like slapped next to your door so that anytime someone opens your door, you can walk in and your lights come on, and when you leave the door, the lights go off, right? That's great. That's super convenient, but since this, if this is hooked up to the internet in any way, right, people now know when I'm not home. Right? And so how do you go about fixing that? Like, how do you go about repairing that? Well, you need to make sure that any channel that you're sending information to is secure in every way. And so that's what we at Microsoft work on a lot. We have our huge cloud provider. Azure is our cloud. And we are able to both securely and massively amalgamate a bunch of data at one time. I believe it's 4 million events per second. It's like some insane number like that. And we're able to take that data, and if you're doing what's called hot path data analytics, meaning there's a bunch of live data feeding down the tube, we can run algorithms on that to see, well, if it gets out of these certain thresholds, should I make any actionable response on that, right? And that's what Internet of Things is sort of lacking right now for the homegrown DIY project right now. There's a lot of data being amalgamated, there's a lot of data being taken, but there's not a lot of inferences being made on that data, and that's our goal, right? So we've done a lot of things for big business with Internet of Things and with maker projects in general. Like we worked with Shell, we worked with Rolls-Royce. Did you guys know that Rolls-Royce makes like not a lot of money on their cars, but they make a ton of money on jet engines? Anybody know that? Am I the only one who did not know that they don't sell them, by the way, they just lease them. People they rent jet engines. That's a thing. I didn't know that was a thing. But getting these jet engines from point A to point B requires a lot of monitoring, right, that we didn't have access to previously, but now we do with things like these small maker projects. So that's taking it up to a corporate, this is big business sort of level. We can see that, oh, well, when this truck is parked for more than 20 minutes, you're actually losing a lot of money. You should keep your trucks moving as quickly and as constantly as possible. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and this is syncing on Matt's point, the lines between hardware and software are growing ever more malleable now, right? As it turns out, yeah, hardware, like this little Arduino board is cool looking, but it's kind of useless without software, and vice versa, right? Like software is kind of useless without good hardware to run on it, right? So that again is where we're able to take these small devices, which are great at pulling in data, but they're not great at crunching them straight up, right? There's not enough on this board to run a complex mathematical algorithm to say, hey, take this data, and if it's outside of this certain threshold, maybe you should send an email to someone. By then, I fried it, right? So that's what we use our cloud for, and that's what the garage is focused on doing right now. It's a lot of fun. I do believe they do tours, so if you guys are ever interested in a tour, let me know. We can go in and we don't even have to tell them. We can just go in while they're doing things and just harass them and see what happens. It'll be great. The next thing I want to talk about is crowdsourcing and how important crowdsourcing is. And where it can go wrong and where it can go really well. So far, Microsoft in previous years has not been known for taking in customer input and applying that real time to a lot of things, right? Sorry. But we've gone ahead and we've made a lot of moves for the open source industry right now. Do I have any devs in the room? Any developers? Got one? Cool. So .NET, our premier platform for development, right? You can code in C# on .NET, that's our language. Used to be this closed sort of ecosystem, right? You could only code on .NET if you had a PC, right? If you bought Visual Studio, which is our development environment, right? And if you were working on a Windows app, right? But we've gone ahead and we've open sourced .NET. So now everyone can come in and play with .NET. It's completely open source, so people on Linux can make a .NET implementation for Linux and OS X. You can actually code in C# on a Mac now, which is like, For me, I don't know. I was geeking out about it. I realized everyone's like, yeah, Gavin, that's good. Good for you. But no, you can do all these things. We've made ourselves open, and in doing so, what we've done is, to contrast, there's always been another version of .NET that was specifically for open source. It's called Mono. Mono was made shortly after .NET was made so that we could do things like code in C# on a Mac. But Mono, since they weren't looking directly at .NET code, didn't have all the features that .NET had, right? And so there was this big issue with feature parity. But now that we've open sourced .NET, Mono has gotten huge. It's gotten better, right? And we can have more developers who always want it or who now feel a reason to use their hardware or their current software and code against ours. So it only makes our products better, right? We also, in doing so, in making it open source, we've got other developers who can look at the source code for .NET and go, huh, this thing is bad. This is all bad. These 30 lines of code need to go, and this is what needs to be put in place, right? And they can submit those changes, and we can make our own products better, right? So it's great. That being said, making something open source is not without its short straws, I'll say. So we need to monitor very closely anyone who tries to throw anything into .NET, right? So which is why we have a team dedicated to anyone who makes a push request. Hey, you should put this in our system. We have to go in and monitor, right? But that's that pales in comparison to the good we're getting out of it, right? And the products we've been able to make and things of that nature. Let me see, what else do I have up here? Oh, Roslyn is our compiler that also got open source, so now we're contributing to that movement as well. And I've got one more thing I wanted to talk about. Maker communities in general. So I work really, really closely with students. I love students. I love going to different universities like UNH and talking to students and helping them get ramped up in their own tech. And I find that a ton of them use whatever's closest to them, right? Or whatever costs them as little as possible. Being a student, all of 2.5 years ago, I started learning Android development because I had an Android phone in my pocket. Downloading Android Studio was free, and I could publish to the store for $20, right? So yeah, let's do that. And in making our stuff more accessible, our software development tools and making everything open for everyone to see, in my first year at Microsoft was the first year we made everything open source. No one even knew that we did it. And now, it's been 2.5 years now. Now, 2.5 years later, I'll go to like a Northeastern University or UMass Amherst and things like that. Northeast is a great school. Oh my, you don't even know. Oh, you're a Northeastern grad? Y'all's computer science department throws down. Like, they're amazing. They've got this one group that reverse engineered Uber. Yeah, if you guys ever see surge pricing on Uber, like it's 3 times the regular cost, walk a block and wait 10 minutes and tell me what happens. It's insane what they were able to find out in Northeast. Anyway, completely off point. So I'll go to these schools, and now I don't even have to do any evangelizing on campus anymore. Now that these things are free and easily accessible for students, and students who had a Mac and thought, well, I could never code for Windows on my Mac, right, are doing it without having to hear from me, right? So it's great. Open source communities are great. Microsoft is a huge proponent of open source. I personally love working in open source communities. And Maker stuff in general is great. So if you guys ever wanted any resources in Maker stuff, we offer that, a ton of it. If you guys want my contact info, feel free to hit me up. I feel like I'm hitting my 20 minutes. Did I hit my 20 minutes? I'm good? Oh, sweet. Do you guys have any questions or anything? Is this relevant to you guys? I realized that someone was like, so a Raspberry Pi isn't a thing that you eat, right? And I was like, oh, I planned wrong. So I'm so sorry if it's not. Yes.
I have one bit of feedback which I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
My employees actually said to me recently that Google is the evil empire, and I said to them, no, Microsoft's supposed to be the evil empire. So you've weathered the storm and come out the other side apparently. We have, yes. So I don't I don't think anyone's evil, but Google is able to build this amazing sort of customer entity, right? Their customer-facing branch is insanely nice, right? Even I look at Google and I look at, oh, they're heroes because everything they give me is free, right? What you don't take into consideration is that Google has already made their money off of you. So the fact that you have a Gmail tells all their income, their revenue models have always been ad-based, right? And so they've taken your data, on the internet, and they're able to market to you, which is fine. That is great.
as a student, when I found out that that's how Google makes their money off of me, I was like, well, I would much rather give them my me instead of my dollars. So yeah, that's great. Microsoft, we did go through this sort of, large company, evil monopoly sort of situation, and we had this sort of sales model where it was very, very procedural, right? We make a product once every few years, we sell it to you, and we don't see you for another 3 years until we make the new product, right? But now, with the dawn of industry changing and people's revenue models and business models changing, we've decided to make these things, like Office is our biggest moneymaker, right? We've built Office as a service now. So you can subscribe to Office and pay as much as you want, and in exchange, you get a consistently updated experience. Yes?
2 questions. First question is, how do you arrange a tour of the garage tour?
Oh, you harass me. Yeah, the garage. You harass me. We've got one in Boston, in Cambridge, right next door, right in our Nerd Center, our New England Center for Research and Development. So you would harass me, and I would harass the building manager, and we'll come in, mosey on in. Yeah, I did. Wake up. I sure do. If I were a good professional, I'd have business cards, but I ran out yesterday, and I'm waiting on them to come in. But you can find me. Oh, actually, I didn't put it here. That's a bad thing to do. Scatterbrain, guys. That's how I live my life. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and throw my email address in here. And if that takes too long, I'll notepad it out. It's my first name, not my last name, at Microsoft.com, guys. So feel free to take that down. If you want to find me after and grab my contact information, that's totally fine as well. Great. Yes?
Does Microsoft have a venture arm?
Yes, we do. It's called Microsoft Ventures. So at our program, Microsoft has a program for startups called Bismarck. And that is a 3-year program wherein we literally give you everything we have in terms of development tools, right, in terms of software. So if you're building a technology startup, we want to be a part of it, right? And for that 3 years, we give you our development environments, a bunch of operating system keys, a Microsoft Developers Network subscription, an Ultimate one, and you get up to, I believe, after all 3 years, it's $60,000 worth of cloud infrastructure and platform as a service. So after that 3 years, we always get this sort of, cocked eye. We're just like, okay, well, after that, what happens? Like, do you take a part of my business? No, we don't. Right? Yeah, no, and it's a valid thing to ask, right? Like, what do you want for it? The idea, and this is me turning my badge around, the idea is to get you guys overwhelmed and happy and excited and entrenched in our systems and our technology that after those 3 years, you're in revenue phase, right? And you want to pay us to use our stuff. You want to be partners at that point. And we do have some amazing statistics. Every dollar we make, you make $8 on average. Every dollar we make, our partners make $8. So, yeah, that's so a part of that Bismarck program is also an entryway into Microsoft Ventures, and that is our venture capitalist sort of firm. We do have our own startup accelerator over on the West Coast, about near the mothership, our campus. If you ever wanted to network with other professionals, how do I be a CEO? How do I find a CFO? That sort of thing, or just see if your startup is doing something very similar to another startup, and maybe you guys can, joint venture it out. We definitely have things in that vein as well. We also have startup pitch competitions. Our one last year was actually in the vein of the Maker Project. The Connected Home is what we went and marketed. And the person with the best pitch ended up getting, I believe, $20,000 for their startup idea. And that was cold hard cash. Yes?
I just mentioned that there are actually some Bismarck network partners here in New Hampshire.
Sweet. Yeah. The network partners. You're a network partner? Yeah. Congrats. I'm so happy to hear that. I got a fan in the room. Yes. That never happens, guys. Never happens. You go to MIT, you never get a fan. You're just like, everyone's like reading Richard Stallman's Bible. So I'm happy to see that. So Bismarck Network partners can dole out subscriptions. You guys can vet out the company. You can give Bismarck to other startups as well. Yeah, it's a great program. I have a subscription just because, because free stuff, right? Why not? The requirements for getting in are pretty easy to meet. You have to be less than 5 years old as a startup. You had to have made less than $1 million. You have to be privately held, meaning you're not on the stock market. And you have to be doing something with technology, guys. That's pretty much it. So we're in our investment phase for cloud right now. Right now it's us and AWS sort of battling it out, and I love to see that because when two big companies go at it, it only ends up better for the developers and for the startups. So it's always great. Always great. Great questions, guys. So from a business angle, is there anything specifically you guys want me to talk about? Because I can pretty much rap about anything. Yes.
XP to 7 to
Woo.
8. 8 flopped.
Yes, it did.
What happened? And you're recovering with 10, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody take their eye off the ball?
There were a lot of things that happened. There were some UI and UX designers that had left the team during 8's inception, and someone saw the need to appoint an engineer to the head of user experience, which you don't do. And we tried some other things that just didn't work. What we did do, I think, as a company, we failed fast, right? So we noticed, we got back the feedback we didn't like Windows 8, right? So we launched 8.1 and we got rid of we fixed a lot of things in 8. And 8.1 even didn't have a very long reign, right? We went ahead and we released 10 as soon as possible. One of the biggest things that came along with the Windows 8 release is the presence of an app store. And we built an app store because, honestly, all the other large providers had an app store, and it was a great way to keep their customers in their ecosystem, right? So we felt like we needed to have that as well to sort of keep in customer retention. Because there were a lot of things happening in industry, right? Despite Windows being the most popular operating system out there, it is the most popular desktop operating system out there, right? And while we have a 94% market share on desktop operating systems, if you were to include something like Android and iOS in that, it drops to 14. So we had to make sure that we had a presence in the mobile market. But now we're working on making sure that we've squared off as close to 100% on that desktop operating system market share as possible. And in terms of mobile offerings, we're really focusing on services. So providing our cloud services for mobile apps is a huge thing for us. It's a huge win so far, so we're doing very well in that vein. As well as offering things like Office free for mobile. So we're keeping you in our ecosystem, but we're relying less on the physical hardware to do so. So I think it's a great move. Awesome. Great question. That's a sweaty question. That's a question to make me sweat. Jeez. That's a tense question. Gosh. Well, if that's the case, guys, I'm gonna get off my soapbox here.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Matt as well.
Thank you so much.